Sweden, mid-14th century, around 1347 AD. Winter pressed against the stone walls of the convent like a living thing. The Baltic wind carried the smell of iron and salt, rattling the shutters long after compline prayers had ended. Inside, a single oil lamp burned low, its flame trembling as if it sensed what was about to be revealed. Saint Bridget knelt alone. She was no nigher of a mystic lost in fantasy. Bridget Berger's daughter had buried a husband, raised 8 children, advised kings, and walked the long, punishing roads of pilgrimage. She knew grief. She knew authority. And she knew silence, the kind that stretches until it becomes unbearable. That night, silence did not come. It began as pressure behind the eyes, a heaviness in the chest. The air thickened, as if unseen witnesses had filled the room. Bridget lowered her gaze to the cold floor, pressing her palms together, whispering prayers she had spoken 1,000 times before. Yet something was wrong. The prayers no longer felt like words rising upward. They felt like words being drawn inward, pulled toward a presence she could not yet see. Then the wound appeared, not in flesh at first, but in vision. A flash of crimson against darkness, a puncture, a tearing. Bridget gasped, her breath catching as pain, not her own, passed through her like a blade. She had written of Christ's suffering before, described his passion in detail that unsettled even hardened monks. But this was different. This was intimate, immediate. She tried to look away. She couldn't. The vision sharpened. The figure before her took form, not distant, not symbolic, but close enough to feel his breath. Christ stood wounded, his body marked by lashes and nails, blood tracing slow paths down his skin. The crown of thorns pressed deep, not as ornament, but as accusation. Bridget trembled. She had begged for understanding for years, begged to know why suffering clung to the faithful, why devotion did not shield the innocent, why pain followed prayer like a shadow. Now the answer stood before her, and she was afraid of it. The chamber felt smaller, the walls leaning inward. The lamp sputtered, nearly dying. Bridget's heart pounded, torn between reverence and terror. To see Christ was grace. To see him like this was something else entirely. Her thoughts betrayed her. Why must it be so violent? Why must love bleed? The figure did not speak. Instead, the wound seemed to draw her closer. The gash in his side opened, not wider, but deeper, as if inviting her gaze beyond flesh and bone. Bridget felt an unbearable pull, a command without words. She realized then that this vision was not meant to comfort her. It was meant to confront her. Outside, the wind howled like distant mourning. Inside, Bridget's knees ached against stone as minutes stretched into something eternal. She thought of plagues sweeping Europe, of children dying unbaptized, of widows begging in frozen streets. She thought of her own losses, buried one by one beneath prayer and duty. If Christ was all-powerful, why remain wounded? What would you have done in this moment? Look away, or dare to ask? Her lips parted, the question forming before her mind could stop it. Fear wrapped around her voice. She did not demand. She did not accuse. She asked as a soul pressed against the limits of understanding. Lord, she whispered, tears tracing her cheeks. Why did you give yourself these wounds? The room fell utterly still. Even the wind outside seemed to pause, as if creation itself leaned closer to hear the answer. Step 2, Banaden, step 2. The stillness did not break all at once. It deepened. Saint Bridget felt it first in her chest, a weight pressing inward, as though her heart were being slowly lowered into water. The air grew warmer, heavy with the scent of blood and myrrh. The wounds before her no longer hovered in vision alone. They radiated meaning, memory, consequence. Then Christ spoke, not with thunder, not with command, with sorrow. "These wounds were not given," he said softly. "They were taken." Each word landed like a stone dropped into deep water. Bridget's breath trembled. She had expected explanation, perhaps comfort, but not correction. Not this quiet reversal of everything she assumed she understood. The wounds began to change. She saw hands driving nails, not with fury, but with indifference. Faces in the crowd blurred together, some mocking, some weeping, most simply watching. Christ's eyes did not search for enemies. They searched for those who claimed to love him, yet stood silent. "These wounds," he continued, "were carved by forgotten mercy, by prayers spoken without obedience, by faith that feared suffering more than truth." Bridget's heart recoiled. She felt exposed, as though the words were not meant for the world, but for her. The wound in his side pulsed. From it flowed not blood alone, but scenes, visions pouring forth like confession. She saw monks arguing over power, while the poor starved at their gates. She saw nobles kneeling in gold-lined chapels, rising only to crush the weak outside. She saw souls asking God for relief, yet refusing the transformation pain demanded. And then she saw herself. Moments she had buried beneath piety surfaced impatience masked as discipline, pride dressed as devotion, fear disguised as humility. Bridget clutched her chest, struggling to remain upright. "No," she whispered. "I have given everything." Christ's gaze met hers, not accusing, but piercing. "You have given much," he said. "But suffering is not removed by devotion alone. It is redeemed by union." The word union echoed, heavy and unsettling. The wounds drew closer now, luminous in the dim chamber. Bridget understood with growing dread that Christ was not explaining pain from a distance. He was inviting her into it. "To love me," he said, "is to carry what the world refuses to bear." Silence followed, thick, suffocating. Bridget realized then that the question she asked had not ended. It had only opened a door she could no longer close. Could you accept a truth that asks you to suffer differently? Not less, but deeper. Her tears fell freely now, striking the stone floor like quiet bells. She felt the temptation rising, the temptation to ask him to take the vision away, to let her return to safe prayers and distant reverence. Instead, Christ extended his wounded hand. The invitation was unmistakable and terrifying. What would you have done? Reach forward or pull back? As Bridget lifted her trembling hand toward his, the chamber darkened further, as if the world itself were holding its breath for what would come next. Step 3 Banaden, step 3 her fingers never touched his. Before flesh could meet flesh, the vision shifted, sharply, violently, as if mercy itself had drawn a boundary. The wounds did not vanish. They multiplied. Bridget was no longer in the convent chamber, but suspended in a vast, shadowed expanse where time dissolved into consequence. Christ stood before her still, yet now the wounds spoke louder than his voice. She saw them opening across history. Every act of cruelty that went unanswered. Every injustice tolerated in silence. Every moment when love could have intervened, but chose comfort instead. Each wound deepened not only on his body, but in the world itself. "These wounds remain," Christ said quietly, "because love is still refused." The truth struck Bridget with unbearable clarity. The passion had not ended on Calvary. It continued. Whenever suffering was observed but not shared, Whenever faith admired the cross yet fled its weight. Then his voice softened. "But listen," he said. The darkness thinned. A different light emerged, dim but steady. Bridget saw souls kneeling beside the wounded Christ, the poor, the sick, the despised, the forgotten. Their hands were scarred, their backs bent, yet their faces were radiant with a strange, unshakable peace. "They carry my wounds," he said, "not to increase suffering, but to transform it." The Bridget understood at last. The wounds were not symbols of defeat. They were doors, openings through which divine love entered human pain. To ask for their removal was to ask love to retreat. Her strength failed. She fell to her knees, not in fear now, but in surrender. "Then let me carry them," she whispered. "Not nails in flesh, but the burden of compassion, the cost of truth, the ache of loving a broken world without escape." Christ smiled, not with triumph, but with rest. "One suffering is united with mine," he said. "It no longer destroys. It becomes light." The vision began to fade. The vast expanse folded inward, the wounds dimming like embers at dawn. Bridget felt herself returning, slowly, gently, to the cold stone floor of her convent chamber. The lamp was still burning. Morning light crept through the narrow window. Outside, the world remained unchanged. Plague, poverty, cruelty, and prayer all waiting beyond the walls. But Bridget was not the same. She rose unsteadily, her heart marked forever by what she had seen. From that day forward, she would write not to escape suffering, but to interpret it. Not to soften the cross, but to reveal its hidden power. And those who later read her visions would feel it. That unsettling pull, that quiet challenge echoing across centuries. If love still bears wounds, what does that ask of you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The room fell silent once more. But this time, it was not empty.